Favorite fairy tales, HGB?
My favorite fairy tales. As I grew up, I probably had sort of traditional favorites. I love Beauty and the Beast and Little Red Riding Hood. As I studied fairy tales a little bit in college, and still my favorite is the Snow Queen. Actually, as part of a theater exercise, I did a kind of modernist interpretation of the Snow Queen. It was like we had to take a traditional story and do an interesting interpretive performance of it, and we had a partner, and so actually I think I dressed in black and my partner dressed in white. I'm just remembering this right now. And I read it while she did kind of interpretive, Indian-inspired dance to it. So the Snow Queen is definitely one of my very favorites. So I actually have a manuscript, that's not really book-shaped yet, sitting on my hard drive that is sort of like this fairy tale mashup pulling from a lot of my favorites. So someday I might get back to that. Right now it's kind of a mess, sort of the way this one was at the beginning. Yes.
When you go back to Massachusetts tonight or tomorrow, and I assume
Not
you're
till
going
Saturday.
to fly airplane?
Eventually I will be on a plane.
When you get on the plane and go down the aisle to find your seat, and you see somebody with a copy of the book,
I have not yet seen anyone reading the book. I am not on the subway, not on airplanes.
will you stop and talk to them about it?
I would probably ask them how it is, and then I would decide what else to say after that. But I haven't seen anyone. I know my editor called me to say that she saw some big bearded guy reading it on the subway, and she knew it was because he'd taken the jacket off. but she's the editor. She knows what it looks like with the jacket off. So she's so excited that she spotted it, and not only in the wild, but naked in the wild. But no, I haven't seen anyone reading it yet. So I haven't been really paying that much attention to it. Normally, I'm that sort of person scopes what other people are reading. But
are you presently in negotiations with anybody for the movie version?
The film rights have already been optioned. They were optioned not long after the book sold. Almost a year ago, the film rights were optioned. So I have learned through this that publishing is slow and film is glacial. Very, very, very slow. They are working on it, and by working on it, I assume people are having meetings with other people's people and talking about things. Summit Entertainment has the film option, and they are very enthusiastic about it. They are talking to David Heyman, who produced the Harry Potter films, about possibly producing, and this is where we're at right now with the talking. And then Lionsgate just bought Summit, which I know from the internet and not because anyone told me. Who knows what might happen in the next while, but they are working on it. It is hopefully going to happen at some point in the foreseeable future.
Put a good word in for me, because I want to play the gray guy.
I'll see what I can do. I get people, even on Twitter, asking me how to audition. I was just they didn't even tell me somebody else bought the studio. I don't think they're going to tell me when, auditions are. So I will actually, for an author, I will have a decent amount of, I hesitate to use the word input. It's more they will tell me what they're doing, and they will wait for me to say yes. Whether or not there will ever be a chance to say no in there is, who knows. But I trust that they're enthusiastic. They really want to do the book justice. I had a meeting with one of the producers who said that she thinks that the book is going to, this was before the book came out, she said she thinks it's going to be the kind of book that has the fans that really want the movie to get it right, and she doesn't want to end up with a Lord of the Rings, there are elves at Helm's Deep sort of situation, and we don't want to piss off the fans. So I really think they're going to have to do it justice. It's going to hopefully capture the spirit of the book, but again, a book is one thing and a film is another. So they're going to have to change things. They're going to be able to do things with a film that I could never do on paper, but there are going to be things that I could do with words that they can't do. With film, sometimes people ask me what my dream cast is. I really don't care. I want to see the costumes. I can write things everyone has this spectacular gown. I don't really need to think about how many buttons this thing has, and now someone's probably going to have to know how many buttons this thing has, because they're going to actually have to construct all these things. And I never in a million years sat and wrote and thought someone's going to have to make this clock. It never even occurred to me. I'm not entirely sure it's possible. They'll probably end up CGIing it, so maybe it will be possible. But it wasn't something that I foresaw. So, I mean, maybe that will make it a more interesting movie because I never really thought of like it having the possibility of becoming a film. But they're working on it. I hope. No one really does.
How long did it take you to write the book?
Writing start to finish, it took me, that very first, that National Novel Writing Month where I was just like, oh, there's a circus, was 2005. The next, I was also bad, and I sort of only wrote during National Novel Writing Month for several years. Like, I wrote in November and didn't really write the rest of the year because I'd just written a whole lot, and then it's like the holidays, and then I'm tired, and then it's November again. So, so I spent 2006 and 2007, both of those National Novel Writing Month Novembers, I just wrote about the circus. I didn't even know where I was going, didn't have a plot, I just wrote about the circus. Technically, this is cheating, because you're not supposed to work on the same project, like 2 years in a row, because I'm friends with all the people at National Novel Writing Month now, so I think they've forgiven me. But so I had, at the end of those 2 years, kind of at the end of 2007, I had over 100,000 words of all this circus stuff, and it didn't have plot. To give you an idea of how little plot it has, that is over 100,000. That's probably like equivalent length of what the book ended up being. Celia's not in it. Celia does not exist in that draft. Like, Bailey's in it, most of the Bailey stuff is in it, and Papa and Widget are in it, and almost everyone else is in there not doing anything they were supposed to be doing. But Celia is not in that draft, and the draft that I added Celia to the draft after that, and the draft that I started querying literary agents with had no competition. Hector's not in it. There's a huge drastic changes that went through, and then I pretty much rewrote all of that over summer 2009 to spring 2010, which is when I signed with my literary agent, and then I made additional changes, and not really changes, I just kind of added more stuff for him over that summer. So it technically took about 5 years from start to finish. I took a lot of time off in between. Yes.
You were talking earlier about the circus technically being like a place. Was there ever a set place for this, or was it always in the movies?
It was always a traveling circus. I think that idea of a traveling carnival is really interesting, where you're just it's something magical that can show up in your own backyard, which is like an element of that I always kind of enjoyed about that. My hometown has a fair that is in the same place like every last week of August and seemed kind of predictable, and I just kind of thought, like, wouldn't it be more fun if you didn't know it was coming? It just sort of appeared. And I think it added an element. It made it seem more magical to have it just appear rather than it just be like a place that you knew where it was, that you could go. And I think that kind of aspect of it was important for I like magic that feels accessible. And I think having it be that sort of thing that, like, you don't have to go find a place. You don't have to go someplace. You don't have to wait for your Hogwarts letter. Like, the circus can just sort of appear is something that I really liked about it. So I was always a traveling sort of circus. Yes.
Are you working on your next novel, and if so, can you tell us anything about it?
I am. It is not anything resembling novel-shaped yet. It is nothing to do with this one. People ask if there's going to be, like, when's the next book? Like, it's not a series. I know everything's a series lately, but this is not a series. It has an end, and I might revisit the world eventually, and not in a what happens next, and in maybe what happened before, or what happened during, or little tangential bits. But I'm working on something completely different. It is still figuring itself out. It is probably best described right now as a film noir-inspired Alice in Wonderland. It kind of, at this point, wants to be a love story wrapped in a detective novel wrapped in another love story. So I'm trying to figure out how to make that work, because apparently I can't do anything straightforward. But I'm looking forward to having more time to work on it. One thing no one ever told me when she gets to be like a writer, like especially like when things get this huge at this level, you have no time to write. Like, at all. Like, I've been so busy since, even before the book came out, like, it's been hard for me, and I need to just kind of, like, focus and really just, like, lock myself away and write. So I'm lucky in that I had it started before this even sold. So I've been kind of periodically working on it. I'm hoping, I had kind of, like, March off, I think, I hope. So I'm going to hopefully be able to lock myself away and write it. And luckily no one's waiting for it, and I've been told to take my time, which is very, very nice. So, but that's kind of the flavor of what I'm working on. Yes.
Come up with the wonderful idea of the clock. I mean, I really want one.
The clock started with Harry Thiessen. Because I wanted, like, the Circus's greatest fan, like, as a character, so I was trying to think of who this person would be, and one of the qualities I wanted him to have was I wanted him to be able to do something that seemed like magic that wasn't. And that's where I came up with the cuckoo clock idea, that, like, this, like, marvelous, wonderful sort of clockwork encapsulated. I don't know how a cuckoo clock works. I don't know how my phone works. Like, so it has that magical quality to it. So that's where I came up with it. And then so I just sat and sort of, I think the entire clock description is from one of those National Novel Writing Months, just like, I'm just writing, and like, yeah, it does this, and then it does this, and then it, like, just not even caring if it was conceivable, and just things that seemed like they would work in a clock, and elements that worked with the circus, and just kind of, I don't know where my brain comes up with these things sometimes, but sometimes I go back and read them, and I'm like, oh, that's pretty cool. And it's almost, I mean, it seems weird to think that you're just kind of like letting your subconscious come up with things, and I think half the time when I'm writing, I write best when I let myself out of my own way, and just kind of let the words fall onto the page the way they want to, and the clock was definitely an instance of that, where it just sort of appeared in my head, and I just wrote down. I'm very visual, too, so a lot of times I'm mostly just trying to translate the pictures in my head into words. Yes?
Are there any other tents that were cut out of the story, and if so, can you share any of them?
Sure, I can give you kind of the gist of some. There's one that I think that was literally cut, like, that I think if you hunt around my Facebook page, it might be in that, like, extra stuff. That was a shadow puppet tent. It was kind of a paper maze that had shadow puppets, and like it kind of went through a narrative as you went through, and it ended up being a little bit long. Originally, during that sprawling draft, all of the tents were very, very long, and went in all of those revisions. I really, like, I had that less is more sort of epiphany moment, and I decided I was not going to let any of the tents be more than a page or so. And that was one that really kind of didn't distill well into, I had the page-long version, but it wasn't as strong as some of the other tents. There was another tent that was essentially, it was called Sharp Objects, and it was essentially like a knife-throwing tent where you were kind of in the middle of it. And then I decided that was just too much knife-throwing. And so that one was cut entirely before it even got distilled. I think that was it as far as other tents that I actually wrote that didn't make it into the book. I'm sure there are other tents that are out there somewhere that I haven't explored. There was one that I never described, I just mentioned somewhere, that anyone who finds it can't describe it afterwards other than to say it was the most frightening experience they've ever had, but no one can put it into words. So I don't even know if I could describe that to anyone, but it's out there somewhere.